it appears that, we're going to be doing these best practices to deal with the dust. Um, of course, that is, it seems like there's two main concerns. One is the dust, and then the other is the aesthetics of the site. And, you touched upon that a little bit, Ray. The actual aesthetics isn't really part of this MOA, but it is, it is something that's going to be addressed when we do the interim use permit. I think it would be helpful for us, for you guys as a subcommittee, to really be looking at, what are the aesthetic options that would be available for this type of operation. So that, I don't see this use going away anytime soon. And so, if we're going to be dealing with it for a certain amount of years, it'd be nice if it looked better. And, what options are available. I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys come up with.
Can you expound on that a little bit?
Well, like the hydroseeding, I think is a good thing. I mean, we've never dealt with hydroseeding, and seeing a green hillside, mound, whatever you want to call it, is better than different layers or different shades of brown or gray. Having, I think, a good vegetation plan, where the property owner identifies an area that will not be disturbed, say, for 6 months or 9 months, maybe even a year. I mean, I don't know their operation, but if you can have some time frames for some of these areas, then you could put forth some kind of vegetation plan that gives a measure of consistency that, at least in the short term, visually is acceptable. Of course, with their operation, they're moving stuff a lot. In a vegetation plan, might not seem the most appropriate for those particular areas. And then also, we're talking about in the MOA, these maximum elevations. Are those going to be what you or we as the council establish as the maximum elevations for the permit? Who knows? Maybe in the end we decided, that this should be lower. I think for this part, for the MOA, I'm okay with the elevations, but I'd like to have further, analysis and see, what is actually needed for the site and for, these potential uses that might be coming down the line. And then, of course, if heights are reduced, then, perhaps we don't allow them to go back to something that is a maximum. Maybe, we establish something that's a little bit lower, so that eventually we're getting to that point where, it's more manageable. Like you were saying, Ray, I mean, it's almost like we were asleep at the wheel and woke up one day and we had all these really high piles of dirt. And so, you can't magically just, wish it all away, but if we can start to work at it and bringing it down and then having things established where, there's a balance, then I think we've made the situation better in the short term. Hopefully that was clear.
Terry?
In reference to the hydroseeding or hydroseeded areas looking better than the ones that weren't, they aren't going to stay green. They're going to turn into shades of brown and on a stagnant pile. hydro seeding, it's not like somebody's lawn that they're going to mow it and water it and keep it green. That's there for dust management, not really for aesthetics. And today, it looks pretty and green. And in the future, it won't, if that pile stays stagnant. So while it may be a temporary measure, and it's good for dust management, I don't think that's really the answer to our aesthetics of the increasing pile height.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not a vegetation expert. I don't know if there is types of hydroseeding that could be applied that, if the site is maintained with water, that it would stay green. I would hope that we would have some kind of vegetation that would allow that to occur if the site isn't disturbed for a long period of time.
But, and that is something for a vegetation manager, not for me, but what I've seen in past of hydroseeded areas is that the reasons to keep the dust down and to create that crust with vegetation, and that those are all sterile seeds so that they don't reproduce and cause invasive plant growth, so that they don't really keep reseeding themselves normally. And again, I don't know what they've seeded with. But, my concern, besides the height that we allowed to escape, and now we have this, I would like this to cover the unmentioned piles and areas, because I don't think this document identifies them properly. And then also we're looking, this document is addressing height, but it's not addressing mass. So, you can take a big pile and squash it down and go edge to edge in your area, and you're going to get a lot more material. And this document seems to me that it's addressing proposed amounts of material, but really only addressing the height. So if you go end to end, you can get a lot more material on there than the cubic feet that are listed as an estimate. I noticed on Pile E, and again, in the last couple weeks, it's squashed out. And there's more piles on it. And that's an area that is supposedly static, but, it really isn't. And I call it E because I put that on my map. It doesn't have any official designation. But that worries me that we're just going to keep, even with heights, if we don't have a new agreement, that this interim memorandum would continue to be in play as the mechanism for enforcement, but that, again, it's going to be subject to interpretations for enforcement and not really limit the amount of material that is ultimately going to have to be moved off the site one way or another, if not permanently, at least temporarily, for them to be able to get down to an engineered fill level. So those are concerns I have, along with the fugitive dust emissions and the quickness that we think that we would be able to get an EIR, interim use permit, if an EIR needs to be done for this, or it needs to be worked in with the CEQA process. I think that thinking we can get it done in 6 or 8 months and allowing for only that amount of material or those dates, I think is probably being very ambitious for us. So I have my concerns about those things.
Sure. Lori?
Well, I've already, stated my specific concerns with the agreement, and, I think it's good that people have raised the issue that it needs to have teeth, and, Ray, your explanation was helpful about, why the feasible language was there for the weekend basis only, and how it's strengthened by the determination by the city engineer, so that was satisfactory to me. But I think that we should kind of go through the agreement and look at the enforcement mechanisms and the penalties, and make sure that, they are as tough as they possibly could be. But with the specific comments I had, I understand the need for the agreement, and I think that, overall, that once we can make it as strong as possible, that I think that it will be helpful to have in place to give us some enforcement mechanisms. Because right now we're sort of operating, in limbo, and I think we want to make sure we get it as good as we can, but we don't want to draw out the process too long that it takes until the end of the year. So, I'm hoping that we can move this forward.
Mm-hmm.
Ray.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of improvements that we need to make, and probably need to see that before we act on it. And I think several of them have already been identified by staff. But I think the biggest one is identifying, so what's the situation for the rest of the site, and on a map. And maybe we need to, identify them as E and F or something, E being the one that's already there, and then F being the topsoil processing place. And make some strong statements about what was intended, but it's not all that explicitly clear, namely that, that there wouldn't be any further substantive work on those sites other than, managing the topsoil, which they've been, but that isn't specified at all in here. And also that the work they were doing, and by the way, the subcommittee also noticed that they were working on that big hill there, and we understood that was finished. And so we raised the question, and actually the city engineer shut them down until we found out what the hell they were doing. So we did notice that. And so then you've heard the explanation this evening, as they were, at least an effort was being made to make it more acceptable from a visual aesthetic point of view. But that was a surprise to us as well, so maybe we do need to get all this kind of specified a little bit better so it's more explicit. And I don't see that as something that's a really big problem to do, because there are a lot of things that were raised tonight that I think are pretty evident that we actually have talked about. We just don't have the language that's explicit enough to nail it down so that everyone's comfortable that that's what we really mean. So we're going to have that new exhibit, and we're going to have a new map, and we're going to have, the mean sea level, and all those clarifications that were, pointed out tonight that to make it a better document. But I think, we could probably get that all together by, hopefully by our next meeting. What do you think?
That's the question, staff. So when do you think we might be able to culminate all this? I think you probably got some pretty good notes on what's been said by the public and the council tonight, so.
Mayor and council, I think it's very possible to get this back to you by the next meeting, which would be May the 5th.
Okay, does it need a subcommittee review first, or?
I'll
Probably would hurt. Okay. Then we'll need to set that up. Okay.
We could probably set up the subcommittee meeting next week. So give this week to do the document, get a copy, a draft out to you, and then maybe meet.
It'd have to be towards the end of the week then.
Okay. The only problem is that we have to have it ready for the packet by Thursday.
Oh, boy.
I'll work with you.
Okay.
We'll figure it out.
All right. And then there's a lot of good comments from council and public in regards to the future of this, and I think hopefully we got these captured with some of the things we're going to do, and especially for the environmental impact report in the future for the new interim use permit, so.
Could I say just one other thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to respond to Molly, and I agree with her that, dust is a danger to health.
Yeah.
And there's no question about it. You're quite right. And it took a long time for the EPA to recognize that, but now they've discovered that particulates, particularly the really small ones, are actually worse than some of the other stuff that they were regulating. And so that's a known danger to health, and that's one of the purposes of this interim agreement is to get as much control as we can get over the release of dirt, because it's not helpful to anybody's health to have a lot of dust in the air, and we understand that, and we're trying to do our best to contain it with all the efforts that are identified here. We hope that we can get it as a minimum as possible, and that's what we're trying to do, because we do recognize it's a danger. It's not just an aesthetic thing, it is a health.
More importantly, it's a health issue.
Yes.
It's not, okay. You're the one and only, Michelle, that I'm going to allow for this, because we are at 10:40 p.m.
Well, having been the one who's called the BBAMQ the most and observed the dust the most and took action on it, may I suggest that you put in both a camera and a dust monitor 24/7 that can monitor when the dust is leaving the area and flying at least across Bay Shore, because that's the prevailing wind, and not leave it up to the individual citizen who has to go, is it dusty or is it my glasses? And so actually put in a concrete mechanism to monitor the dust that is leaving the site. A dust, like an air quality machine and a camera, so you can visually see line of sight right down Bay Shore. It's a nice straight road when dust is flying over, and also when dust particulates are actually passing over Bay Shore, and not leave it up to the casual observer, but actually take a concrete action that is measurable and impartial. And it sets off a little alarm that lets people know when dust is flying, and so that people can actually take mitigation measures and not leave it up to observed as it is in the stated in the agreement. So take the human component out of the observation and put in something that's reliable and consistent and 24/7. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Michelle. That's something we can discuss at our...
Yeah, I thought that was a good suggestion. Yeah.
Okay, it is now 10:41 p.m. We are past our 10:30 time of this, and we have a number of items on here. What needs to be done tonight?
Well, we do
we take
have
a-
somebody from the Open Space Committee here for item 10C, so you might want to take that next. And I have a special guest from the coast that came over tonight to help me out with item 10B. So I'd like to get to that too.
Yeah.
So item B and C?
Yes,
Okay, why don't we take, well,
Thank you.
probably take C first.
okay, C should be pretty quick. Okay.
All right, well, I'm gonna see if we can take it just a...
The rest of the
break.
thing, do we need to do the public hearing tonight?
I don't think so, no.
Okay, council up to moving that off to another meeting?
I'm fine. Sure.
Okay.
I'll move to extend the meeting to 11:15, if we can take a 5-minute break.
Thank you.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.